My name is Rob Howard, and I live in the Catskills of upstate New York.
Right. And how old were you when you got your start in photography, and kind of what led you to that interest?
Okay, I was about 23, 24 years old, and I was studying literature and philosophy at the University of Toronto in Canada, and I was in my third year, and my brother got cancer. He got leukemia, and it took my whole family. It threw us a loop, and I ended up dropping out of university just before my final exams that year in May or June, I can't remember. And I just hung out with my brother as he went into the hospital and spent the whole summer in the hospital. And our family just sort of rallied around him until the fall when he went into remission, thankfully. And in the fall, I thought, I really don't have the energy to go back to school and finish my degree. So a friend of mine had just become a model at a modeling agency, and he was meeting all these amazing photographers and models, and it was just seemed like a glamorous world. So we both ended up going down to a pawn shop in downtown Toronto and buying cameras, kind of out of the blue, because I'd never really thought about photography. I'd never even took pictures before. And we just, the moment I held the camera in my hands, it just felt great. It felt right. And I started taking pictures of models for their portfolios, the girls at his agency. And I taught myself how to process film and how to build a little dark room in my bedroom and just start making prints. And then I started I got a little studio and started shooting there, taught myself how to light. And then after about a year, I moved to Sydney, Australia, because I'd heard that they had some really good magazines there. No one in Canada would give me a job. So in Sydney, that's where I started shooting for magazines, and spent about a couple of years there just shooting, and got some wonderful assignments, learned about light, learned about directing, learned about just how the business works. And then moved to Paris and London for a couple of years and learned more and worked for more magazines there. And then I got this job through a family friend to shoot a book for the Moroccan government about an arts festival that the King and the Crown Prince had founded in a village called Asila in about 40 kilometers south of Tangiers on the Atlantic coast. And I went there with my buddy Lorenzo, and we spent 3 weeks just having a ball, photographing theater actors and theater people, artists, other photographers, and dancers, and just basically documenting this whole festival and where it took place and how it took place and all the characters involved. And it became a book. And those were the first pictures that I took that weren't fashion oriented. And it kind of changed my whole trajectory, because after that experience, the Crown Prince, Mohammed, who's now the king, he suggested, why don't you guys go down to, where's that, in the desert, and their food, and just sort of explore the country. Go to Fez, go to Marrakesh, and the high Atlas Mountains, and just explore. And he kind of gave us an itinerary, and we followed his advice and spent about 6 weeks just traveling the country. And I was shooting Berbers and Tuareg people, and built up this little portfolio of images, from the festival, but also landscapes and portraits of people of Morocco itself, and then I went back to Paris where I was living, and I just was like, no, I don't want to shoot fashion anymore. I want to shoot travel and adventure. So ended up moving back to Toronto, and there was a magazine there that helped me on that trajectory. They started sending me to all kinds of cool places. Like my first assignment was to go to Tibet and shoot a story about what was going on with the Chinese government in Tibet, and I ended up spending 2 months on that story, where all kinds of wild things happened. I was in a plane crash. I was in a hotel that burnt, had a big fire, and I was also thrown in jail for 3 days by the Chinese government. So it was a very exciting adventure. And then they sent me to the Sarawak in Borneo to live with this Dayak tribe called the Penan for a few weeks, and that was another amazing experience. And then they sent me to India to live with a Maharaja family in Andhra Pradesh in this town called Venkatagiri, and then Egypt to do a story on the pyramids, and then I started the Canadian Arctic, and it just was these incredible adventures that were really exciting. And with those pictures, my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife many years later, she sent my portfolio of all those adventures to New York and Travel Leisure, and then Condé Nast Traveler, and then Outside Magazine. All these American magazines started hiring me, and so that's when I made the move to come to the States and live in New York.
Had you been to New York when you moved there? Or?
I'd been there a few times, but I didn't really know it, and it scared the crap out of me. It was just so big and kind of seemed menacing. I didn't really get it, but I got this little apartment on 15th and 6th at that time, and I just started working and being sent all around the world constantly by these American magazines. So, and I got this visa called an O1, and it just became my home. And and that was 1994. That was a while ago.
It was when you moved to New York.
Yeah, that's when I moved to New York, 1994. And then my wife, Lisa, she followed 2 years later, I think, in 95. 95. Yeah, she came in 95. We got married at New York City Hall, September 1st, 1995. So yeah, she followed me about a year after.
Did you at that point kind of after several months and years kind of settle into New York, where it kind of became your home? You weren't necessarily intimidated by it anymore like you once were.
No, not at all. It became, like any place, when you move to it, ever so slowly you develop friends and a community, and you get to know it. But I never lost that sense of wonder. And as you walk around New York, you know this yourself. You're like, oh my God, this feels like I'm in a movie. It's still magical for me to this day. I love that city so much. I just really grew to love it. And now, when I go in, I know every square inch of that place. And I have a community and I have a network, and I can get so much accomplished whenever I go in. It's just a wonderful place. I love it so much.
Sure. No. So switching gears a little bit. So let's pivot to September the 11th, 2001.
Yeah. Yes.
You're, of course, now known for shooting this iconic photograph literally seconds before United Flight 175 struck the South Tower.
Yeah.
Can you tell me where you were living at the time?
Yeah, I was living at 71 Broadway, just Rector and Broadway, just south of Wall Street and Broadway. And we were living in apartment 13I, which looked right out at the spire of Trinity Church and the two towers. So great view. And down below we could see Alexander Hamilton's grave right there. It was a great apartment with just wonderful views, amazing neighbors, awesome place to live. And that day, the night before, I had flown in from Venezuela. I'd shot a story about the Orinoco River and all the different indigenous tribes that lived along the river from north to south, and we were shooting a story about all the different fishing techniques and all the many 800 different species of fish in the Orinoco River, which is 4 times as many fish that there are in all the Atlantic Ocean, which was a pretty amazing place. And I just got back late that night, and we'd actually we walked around the towers the night before. So we wanted to go to the bookstore for some reason. I can't remember why. And the guy at the bookstore said, "Come back tomorrow morning and we'll be open." It was just closing up. And so we went back home. And then that morning we woke up and we were just on our way to go out to the towers, just had breakfast. And our doorman, Daniel, said, "Rob, Lisa, a small plane just hit the North Tower." And then we walked out, and it felt like it was weird. There were things falling from the sky, like papers and whatnot, and it kind of felt like, this is weird, but the Yankees had won the World Series a couple times around there, and we'd gotten used to the Yankee parades along that Canyon of Heroes, and it kind of felt like surreal, like it was a Yankees parade or something. But it wasn't that way at all. And I just remember it was a beautiful sunny day, and I just remember thinking, I gotta go get my camera. So we left the street, went back up to our apartment, and I grabbed a Pentax 6.7, one of my favorite cameras, and it happened to have a roll of Tri-X in it. And I just thought, I'll shoot the towers. Oh, and then we saw it was burning. The North Tower was burning. So I just started taking a couple of frames, leaning out my living room window. Lisa was on the phone to someone in Toronto, just saying, "Hey, are you guys okay?" And I was just shooting, and then the second plane came over our building, and I just got that lucky shot. It was pure coincidence that I happened to capture it. I wasn't trying to capture the plane; it just manifested on my film, and then I got the shot as the plane hit the fireball that was emerging from the building upon impact, and that's how the shot happened.
Did you hear as you were shooting? Did you hear the plane, or do you consciously remember that?
No, I don't remember. I don't remember. What I do remember thinking, and this is really dumb, I remember thinking, oh, because it felt like that. It felt. I watched the plane, and I didn't even remember holding my camera up. I guess I did, but I remember seeing it with my naked eye, not through the lens of my camera. And I remember thinking, because it felt like it was traveling kind of slow, but it wasn't. But it felt slow to me, and I just remember thinking, this plane is coming to help. And then it hit. It was just a complete irrational feeling, thought. And then I turn around to my wife, and I just remember screaming, "Oh my God, it's a terrorist attack!" I knew immediately it was terrorists. It was an attack. And I remember we did switch on the television, and it took the people on the television on CNN or whatever we were watching. I can't remember. They didn't know what had happened, and I remember just screaming at the TV, "It's a terrorist attack!" And it took them about 5 minutes to figure out that the second plane had actually hit. It was an interesting thing, and we ended up then going up onto the roof of our building. And there were a bunch of friends up there. And we just watched as the South Tower was burning, and we could see the jumpers, which was really upsetting and freaky. And I still think of that to this day, that decision that they had to make. You know, do I incinerate or do I just dive to my death?
Yeah.
It's a complete untenable decision. It freaks me out to even think about it. But so we watched that, and I just continually was taking pictures as the building was burning. We could watch it, and then the South Tower fell. I remember watching it teeter to one side, and then it righted itself, and then it imploded within itself. And I have photographs of all of that as well that nobody's seen. And that was crazy. And then I remember the debris and the explosion just coming towards us like in a crazy movie. And there was a guy from the stock exchange. He had his vest, and he was up there with us. And he just kind of let us all out. He's like, "Everybody leave, we gotta evacuate." And he got us all into the stairwell, and we all ran down, and we all thought we were gonna die. It was a crazy feeling. I just assumed we were gonna die, and everybody felt that way. There were about 20 of us. And then we emerged into the lobby, where it was filled with dust and smoke, and people were coming up from the subway, the Wall Street or Rector Street subway, just covered in this white dust, chalky dust. And I remember going out for a moment. We could see part of the fuselage. I think there were some tire wheels from the plane right on the corner on Rector Street, and we saw a woman who looked to be dead. Maybe she wasn't, I don't know, but it was very surreal. And then for some reason we went back up to our apartment, gathered some stuff, and then I took a camera and some film and passport and a little backpack full of clothes, and Lisa grabbed some clothing as well and passport, and we just left, and I started taking pictures along the whole way. And then we ended up following some people to the Manhattan Bridge, and then it was just a huge migration of people leaving Manhattan and heading towards Brooklyn across the Manhattan Bridge, and it was so surreal. And we ended up moving in with a friend in Red Hook for a few days after that. And that was that day for us. It was just so surreal. As you know, it was nuts.
Do you remember when it happened? I can imagine being on the roof and watching the towers collapse. I mean, that must have been extremely loud and surreal.
It's tremendously surreal. I forget all the noises of that day. I have no memory, no recollection of sounds. I can't remember it. It must have been very loud, but I have no recollection.
Do you remember some of the smells?
Yeah. It reminded me of the burning ghats in Varanasi in India, which, of course, is the smell of burning hair and bodies along the Ganges River. And that acrid, awful smell, which had seared itself into my brain from a few trips to Varanasi over the years. So I remember just thinking, God, it smells like Varanasi. Of course, it was probably different because there were so many more things burning, like plastics and all the things that comprise the architecture of those buildings. But to my mind, it just smelled like death, and it smelled like the burning ghats of Varanasi.
Obviously it's been, several years since the attacks, but do you still have nightmares about that day?
No, I did for a bunch of years, and I remember, God, I definitely had PTSD because I remember having to go just as soon as the flight started going again. I had to go to Las Vegas to shoot a story on the beginning of Ultimate Fighting, and for Men's Journal magazine they sent me, and I was staying in the Mandalay hotel and my room happened to overlook the airport with all these planes taking off and landing, and I remember having to shut the curtains and because it was so terrifying for me to watch these planes fly by the hotel as I was in bed, and I just remember cowering underneath the covers, just like freaking out. And the fact that we now live in the Catskills, 3 hours outside of the city, huge reason we're here is because of 9/11 and just the fear that was part of our psyche for years. We didn't want to live in the city anymore. We were so happy to move out. But the fact that we're here is huge reason because of that day.
Is it, as you look back and you remember back that day, is it recalling some of these memories, is that difficult for you?
No, it's weird. That's a great question, but I don't think so, because honestly, Christian, it feels like it happened to someone else. I've built some sort of psychic wall to protect myself, but it feels like it happened to someone else. I don't think about it very often. It doesn't feel like me anymore. I don't know why. And I don't know what that means. And it's like it happened to someone else.
Oh, it's really interesting.
It doesn't really. Yeah, it's weird. Maybe it's purely protective. I don't know.
Well, it was, the one photograph that was, of course, published. I mean, it's so striking. Actually, I have it up here on my computer monitor, and as I look at it, it literally gives me the chills, and I'll probably put it up as the main image for the interview for other people to see who haven't seen it yet, because it's, even though it was released and it's out there, it's at least to my mind, with the pictures that I've seen of September the 11th, it's not as common as a lot of other images that people have seen of that day. I mean, and it's interesting, your photograph, it's, you go online and it's often cited by conspiracy theorists, who claim,
Yeah.
looking at,
Yeah.
zooming in, that the underside of the 767 has it's carrying some sort of a bomb or
Yeah.
incendiary device. And I'm kind of curious, as the person who took that photograph, what your thoughts are on that. And
We know that these planes were commandeered by the Saudis from Al Qaeda, and that had been planned, and it wasn't the U.S. government. It had nothing to do with the U.S. government. So I just kind of shake my head and just go, "Oh my Lord, that's nuts." And the picture is the picture. It just the angle of the sun at that time, when it was 9:17 or whatever time of day it was, I can't remember, but it was the angle of the sun and the shadows on the bottom of the plane and the angle. I mean, it was a plane, and they happened to see things that, in their minds, constitute a bomb or something. But no. A few weeks later, I ended up having to shoot a series of portraits of people who had survived, who had been in the buildings that day and had survived, including a policeman who had been pinned underneath for, I forget how many hours, 3 days or something, 2 days, 3 days. That for me was incredibly therapeutic exercise to meet these people, photograph it. I remember photographing one guy whose sister was on one of the planes and his daughter was on another. Both died, and he was in the buildings that day, and he survived. There were so many wild stories from that day. I can't remember a lot of the specifics, but for me, that was an incredibly therapeutic assignment. I think we photographed about 12 different people. It was great.
Well, yeah, it's something that's, done in a different spirit, in a different light. It wasn't, your job per se. Wasn't, well, I mean, it was done, yeah, I can see how that, something like that would be completely therapeutic and, really help you.
It was, and I guess my point is that not one of those people who survived were saying that it was a conspiracy. It was the U.S. government. They all knew what happened.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was an interesting time because for at least a short period of time, people were brought together. We were, unified. We were one. We were, one nation who had experienced this, and it seemed to, at least to me, it seemed to unravel fairly quickly.
Well, you're right, and that reminds me of just the feeling of goodwill in the city for weeks after. It was an amazing vibe. New York City was full of love and just very, very good energy. Everybody, we were all in it together. We were displaced for I forget how many weeks, 6 weeks or something. The National Guard took over Lower Manhattan, and our building was off. We couldn't go, so we moved into the Soho Grand Hotel for 5-6 weeks, something like that, and we were there with a bunch of the firefighters and police and military who were also living there too, and just the vibe was amazing. Everybody was hugging and so friendly. And then all these people from all around the country came as part of FEMA to help and distribute money, and all these people from the Midwest it was great. I just remember feeling a lot of nice energy after. You know, it was a funny dichotomy because, you know, the horror of the day and then the aftermath, just the positivity of amazing humans coming together. It was great and interesting. When we did move back in to our building at 71 Broadway, there were all these tables set up, and tourists were coming, and all these tables set up outside of our front door of people selling pictures from 9/11.
Yeah.
And my pictures were being sold.
Oh.
You know, of course, without my permission. There were, and it was so surreal seeing my pictures being sold on the street for months after. It's like, oh my Lord. And it's like, those are my pictures. It was just weird. Seeing them everywhere.
Did you ever end up making any money off of that photograph? I mean, it's everywhere now, but
I did. You know, well, first of all, the photo director of New York Magazine, who was a friend at the time, and he called, Rob, did you get any pictures? And I remember not knowing. I didn't know. So I remember taking the film up to my lab, and they processed the rolls right off the bat. And they called me up, Rob, you got a picture of the plane. And so they ended up publishing those two pictures of the impact and the plane before it hit on the first two pages, which is usually advertising in New York Magazine. Mm-hmm. So everybody saw that, and then it ended up selling all around the world. And I was with Corbis and Getty at that time. I'm no longer with any agency, but they ended up selling for years, and I don't know how much, but a lot, which is a weird thing to think, but yeah, I made a lot of money from those pictures.
Do you still get royalties from any of those photos?
No. It kind of petered out once I left Getty and Corbis, and so yeah, and I have no interest. Honestly, I don't even look at those pictures. Mm-hmm. I don't even think about them. They're just out there, and I don't have any here in my house. I would never. I did finally put them on Instagram.
Oh, okay.
20 years on the 20-year anniversary, just, you know, in memoriam. But I wouldn't even look at them for 20 years.
Wow. So when that series of pictures you took, so you got two pictures. The one I saw, seconds before the plane hit the tower, and actually hitting this. So you got two pictures total. So were there more pictures you took in that sequence?
Yeah, they were just of the burning towers, and then and I was shooting them on 6x7, so I only had 10 frames on that roll.
Okay.
So I just shot a few frames, and then bang bang, I got the plane, and then a few after of the impact, and then the explosion, and then I got a few of the explosion, and then of course, as I told you, we went up to the roof and kept shooting the building, and then as it fell.
It's interesting you went up there, were taking pictures. I'm wondering if that, you'd been a photographer for so many years at that point, and it had been your life. I wonder if it was just it was instinct at that point, like, hey, I'm going to snap pictures. And
yeah, totally. And it was interesting too. I think one of the reasons why there were so many amazing photographs of that day is because Magnum happened to be having a big meeting of all their great photographers in New York during that time. Oh. So there were all these incredible Magnum photographers around that day too. So it was there were just some of the best photographers, reportage photographers on the planet were in New York that day, which was very interesting. So that's why there's just so many extraordinary imagery from that time. I guess that day, September 11th, 2001. Yeah, I was in the zone. I was lucky to get that shot. But yeah, I was tuned. I was just tuned. It was just part of my work. It was great.
Yeah, no,
that's I was able to be open and aware and nail that moment. But God, what a day! What a day! And we're still living with the consequences today, aren't we?